Okay. Hi, everybody, and thanks for being here for our annual LiarsFest, sponsored by Seattle Storytellers Guild. We're really happy to have you here, and especially to have Laura Deal here to open our show. And tomorrow at 10 o'clock on Zoom, she will be doing a workshop whose name I forgot to note, but something like, where did you get that idea? If you want to sign up for the workshop, it sounds like it's going to be really fun. So Laura Deal is a storyteller, poet, and author. Her lies have deep roots in her lived experience, but veer off into humor wherever possible. Nothing gives her more joy than making audiences laugh while giving them a glimpse into her world. Her storytelling career has brought her audiences across North America in person and online, from the Women's Storytelling Festival and Fairy Tale Variations to the Good Liars Club series. Her repertoire also includes wisdom and folktales, family stories, and her living history portrayal of Marion Woodman, which I would really like to see. I don't know who that is. She is the 2024 recipient of the J.J. Renault Emerging Artist Award. You can find her stories on YouTube, Story Podcast, and the Apple Seat on BYU Radio. Her albums, The Diffendafer Taffy Cafe and Other Stories, and Simple, Clever, and Wise, received honors from the World Storytelling Awards. So I will turn it over to Laura and let her take us where she will, which will be someplace really crazy, I'm sure. Laura.
Thank you so much, Marty. Thank you for inviting me to this fun event. I'm really excited to hear all the stories tonight. So I'm in Boulder, Colorado. How many of you have been to Boulder? Oh, just about everybody. How many of you have heard weird things about Boulder? A few. Well, I'm here to tell you that all those weird things are true. And a few years ago, I was trying to think of a new business that I could start. And the problem is, it's really hard to stand out in Boulder. I mean, we have Nobel Prize winning scientists. One of our personal friends was the first person in the world to see the Bose-Einstein condensate in the lab. Well, he didn't get the Nobel Prize for that. His boss did, but he was the one that saw it. And another friend of ours worked on the Rosetta and New Horizons missions that sent spacecraft out into the far reaches of the solar system and beyond. And besides scientists, we have world-class athletes. We have Ironmen and women. We have cyclists, both mountain and road. We've got mountain climbers, rock climbers, social climbers, and we've got dancers and yogis and just about anything that you can imagine. We've got medical and recreational cannabis. And if you get the munchies, well, we have more grocery stores per capita than anywhere else in the world. And people will say the weirdest things in grocery stores. I was at King Soopers once, which is our version of Kroger, and this woman had one of those packages of those mini carrots. You know, I think they're just regular carrots shaved down to little nubbins. And she says to the grocer, There's not enough ranch dressing in the world to make these taste like carrots. And then there was the little boy at Lucky's Market. He saw the bulk section. He said, "Gummy worms. Are they all natural?" Because it's Boulder. But the worst, or best, I'm not sure how to count it, was the woman who came up to my husband Kevin at Sprouts and said, "I'm a big fan of jeans, and I really appreciate it when people wear them up around their waist. So thanks for that." You can imagine what I thought of that. Well, people will eat the weirdest things too. I mean, we've got all the special diets covered, but some people, they want to live off the land. They have chickens to get their own eggs. One of my friends will only eat trout if she's caught it herself in a pure mountain stream. And another friend came home, this was back in grad school, and found deer hooves in the disposal of his kitchen sink. True story. His roommate, who belonged to a running cult, which I'm not even going to get into, she had decided to butcher an entire deer in their condominium. I mean, maybe because people do stuff like that. We also have any kind of healer that you can imagine. We've got medical doctors, we've got naturopaths, chiropractors, acupuncturists, shamans, whatever you need. And any kind of exercise program that you want. I mean, you know, probably, I'm sure, in Seattle and Washington, you can do hot yoga or goat yoga or Ashtanga yoga. Well, I heard pretty soon you'll be able to do hot Ashtanga goat yoga in Boulder on locally sourced organic hemp yoga mats grown right here in Boulder County. I mean, I thought maybe I could do something like yoga with kangaroos. But then I heard that somebody in Golden, and for those of you who don't know, Golden's just down the road, and it's where all the Coors beer is made. Somebody in Golden was already doing that. I mean, how do you begin to stand out when the weirdness of Boulder has already infected Coors country? I don't know. So I was trying to figure out what I should do, and what I do when I'm trying to figure something out is I'll meditate. And so I was breathing and clearing my mind and clearing my chakras. Now, I could lead you all through how to do that if we had more time and there weren't quite so many skeptics in the audience. I mean, it's all right. We've all been skeptics at one time or another. I mean, even my husband, Kevin, he's a skeptical scientist, works at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. He has noticed this phenomenon when he goes out on an errand. Doesn't matter if he's in the car or on his bike. He will notice someone maybe wearing a weird hat or a special bumper sticker. And on his way back from the errand, it doesn't matter if he's been out 15 minutes or 4.5 hours, he will see that same person in about that same place. It's happened so often that we figure he must just be the star of the Truman Show and there just aren't enough extras. So anyway, I'm meditating and I'm trying to ask the universe for ideas about what I should do for my business. And the only answer I get is that I should go for a walk. Now, I usually take my camera with me because I like to take pictures of the clouds or the flowers or the animals, whatever I see. But this was very clear. I shouldn't take my camera this time. And so I set out and as I walked, I got the message that I should listen to what the Flatirons were singing. If you haven't been to Boulder, you may not know we have these huge slabs of rock to the west of town that they call the Flatirons because they're up there just like an old flatiron. And I have been able to hear their song from time to time if you get really grounded. And so I went up to go for this hike, and I started up the Shanahan Ridge Trail. Now for me, that's an aerobic workout. Going up the hill, I'm getting passed by all these moms in their Lululemon yoga gear and their 6-year-old kids who are training for the next 10K race and their dogs with legs about this long. And then the climbers, the ones who go bouldering, they carry those big mats on their backs that they put down when they boulder in case they fall. They're all powering past me too. But it's all right. I'm not competitive. I am listening to the Flatirons. And at some point, I get the nudge that I can turn around and head back down. And so I start back down. Now, it's afternoon, so the sun is behind me at this point. And I'm stretching, and at one point, I stretch my hands way back so they're facing back, and I can feel the sun on the palms of my hands. And I really focus on drawing in that light and warmth and opening the chakras in my palms. I mean, you know about those, right? They're not as big as the chakras everywhere else in your body, but they're important. And so I'm drawing this light into my body, and because I'm a Gemini, my thoughts are going 2 directions at once. I'm thinking about the light of the solar system and the Big Bang, the scientific origins of the universe, and how all of that energy has somehow still been working in the sun and coming to us. And then I'm also thinking about it in spiritual terms, you know, creativity and love and all of that energy. And as I'm walking along doing this, I see a cloud, and it's kind of in the shape of an elephant. I mean, it's not perfect, but it definitely looks like an elephant. And so I decide I'm going to take this universe juice that I've been bringing into my body, and I'm going to send it out through my eyes and try to shape that cloud into a more perfect elephant. So I'm really focused on that. I'm concentrating on that. I can see that cloud start to take better shape. And if you're interested in learning how to do this, just let me know. I'll set you up next time you come to Boulder. But I'm walking along and I'm shaping this cloud, and it's getting better and better. And then I realize there's a man coming up the trail toward me. Now, this guy, he's definitely not a Lululemon kind of guy. He's got a dark-haired ponytail, and he's wearing jeans, no climbing equipment. And, you know, he's got that might as well be stoned Boulder vibe. And his aura is pretty murky. And he sees me with my hand still outstretched, drawing in all this energy, and he says, "What are you feeling?" I mean, where do I start? Well, I don't know how enlightened he is, so I just start with the basics. You know, I'm feeling that warmth of the sun on my hands, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to try that." I mean, it's Boulder, so he turns around, he sticks his hands out, and he's just as he says, "Oh, I can feel it too." Our energies just snap into alignment, and I can feel what he is feeling, and in that moment, we both look up at that elephant cloud, and it too just snaps into perfect elephant form. And then it comes down out of the clouds. It steps down onto the path in front of this guy, and he says, "Whoa, I just had a dream like this." And in that moment, I remember that I too just had a dream like this the night before. And sometimes the synchronicities in this town astonish even me. But, when you've done dream work a long time like I have, and, things happen. So this elephant walks up to him and takes her trunk and brushes it on his cheek. And then she comes around him and comes up to me. And she puts her trunk right there on my third eye, and then lays her trunk on top of my head. And I get a full download of what my new business should be. It is so clear. I can even feel the business card in my hand. And I say, thank you, that is brilliant, thank you. And she turns and she walks back to the guy and she brushes his other cheek. And then she climbs back up into the sky and is already returning into cloud and mist. And then she's gone. And the guy, he turns around, and his face is just bejeweled in raindrops, and his aura is completely clear. Now, I take this moment to separate our energies again. Now, this is just a public service announcement. If you ever do an energetic healing, you need to separate your energies when you're done. Otherwise, all sorts of murky things can happen. And he looks at me and he says, "Did you see that?" And I said, "See that? I did that." He said, "Well, what did you do?" I said, "Now the important thing is, how are you feeling?" "Oh, good, really good, but I don't know what just happened." I said, "Well, that is what I do. It's tread therapy, transcendental rapture, enlightened dream cloud therapy. The C is silent." And I go to give him my business card, but my hand is just covered in raindrops. But it's okay. I know the next time his aura needs a little tune-up, the universe will bring us together again. And he thanks me. He asks if he can hug me, and I say yes, and then we go our separate ways, and I thank the universe again for giving me this new business. If you want to come to Boulder and try it out, the first time is always free. I can see anything you dream in the clouds. Thank you. So I have another story for you. That one was one of the very first lies I ever wrote. I was hosting a house concert with Paul Strickland, Cooper Brown, and Rachel Ann Harding, and I knew that it was going to be quite the over-the-top evening, and so I wrote that for that show. But this one is brand new. No one has heard it, not even my usual suspect. I usually try things out on Kevin. Have you ever lost like an earring or a button, maybe a special coin, something that doesn't really matter that much in your life, but you're sorry it's gone? Well, that happened to me. It was a couple of months ago. I was out for a walk, and it was one of those days in Boulder where the wind is pretty chilly, the sun is warm, and when the wind dies down, you got to take off a couple layers. And I got home and I realized that one of my earrings was missing. And this was a pair of earrings that I had gotten in Spain when we went to collect our daughter after her semester abroad. It was a silver earring, nothing fancy, but something I really liked. So I bundled up again. Well, I checked everything first. Of course, the scarf, the hat, the jacket, didn't find it. So I bundled back up and I went out to retrace my steps. And I got around the block to the neighbor who's behind us, and there's a tree in their yard, and I'm just scanning back and forth, looking in the gutter and the sidewalk and the lawn. And then there's a squirrel right in front of me. And it runs right up to me, right up to my shoes. And I take a couple steps back because, well, in Colorado, you got to be a little careful. Every once in a while, one of the squirrels turns up with bubonic plague. You don't want to mess around with that. And I kept backing up and it kept chasing me. I tried stomping my feet and it wouldn't back down. I looked a little more closely. It had a notch out of one ear, was missing a patch of fur. It kind of looked like some kind of mafia boss, tomcat kind of thing going on. So I quit the field. I just turned around and came home. But I was still feeling really bummed about losing my earring. Well, that night I was scrolling through social media, which I do way too much, and I saw one of those videos of somebody who had been feeding the crows for a long time, and the crows would bring them these treats, or treasures like coins or bottle caps or the pull tabs off of a can. And I thought, that's it. I'll start feeding the crows and maybe one of them will find my earring and bring it back to me. So the next day I went out and got a big bag of peanuts, unsalted, still in the shell, did a little research, not a lot, but enough to find out that crows prefer to eat from the ground rather than a platform. So that was easy. I just got a plant pot tray, to catch the water. I just put that out with a rock in it so it wouldn't blow away and put some peanuts in there. And then I waited. And I waited, and the crows were circling, but they didn't come down. And what did show up, of course, was that mafia boss squirrel. Showed up and grabbed 2 or 3 of these peanuts and ran off. And I thought, well, that's not really what I want to be doing. But I thought, I'll just leave them. I'll give it another try. And then the next day, this different squirrel showed up. She was much more elegant, and she was just so cute. She'd run over and she'd pick up a nut and she'd put it in her mouth and she'd run off about 6 feet and then she'd get it all arranged just right. And she'd go out in the lawn and maybe bury it in the lawn or under a tree, or she'd take it and go off into the neighbor's yard. I thought maybe she had a nest there. Well, I started sitting really still on the back deck when she would come, and she didn't seem to mind me being there. And so I got a little closer and a little closer. I mean, I could have discouraged her. I mean, we did have friends from Australia here once who were so enchanted with the squirrels, they built a squirrel feeder designed to keep the birds out, which is totally different from what we usually do here. But I really didn't want to discourage her because, up until 2 years ago, I had pretty much had cats my entire life. And we haven't had a cat for 2 years. And I just enjoyed having this little mammal that would come around and get close. And I don't know. Sometimes she would come up, and if the tray wasn't full, if I hadn't put nuts in that day, she would come up to me and she would look at me like that, like she knew all the neighborhood scuttlebutt. And if I just fed her, she would tell me. And then I would say, I know the tray. And she would go over to the tray and point out the tray is empty. And I'll get you some peanuts. So I felt like we were establishing this connection. And, well, that night I was on my phone again, scrolling, and I saw where somebody had those word buttons that they program with different words for dogs and cats to learn how to communicate in English. And I thought, that's it. Like the crows are never going to come through for me. The squirrels are eating all the peanuts, but maybe I can teach this squirrel to use those word buttons and we can communicate and I can ask it to find my earring. Brilliant, right? So I went and got a starter kit of these buttons and I thought we'll start just with peanut. That'll be like crystal clear, right? So I could program it with peanut, and every time the squirrel would come around and I'd hold out a peanut, I would push that button. Peanut. At first she was a little worried about it, but she got over it pretty quick. And she would come and take the peanut and I would push the button. Well, we did that for about a week, but she didn't show any interest in the button that I could see. She was just happy getting her peanuts. And then one day I was out hanging up the laundry, had my back to that peanut tray, and it was empty. And all of a sudden I hear peanut, 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 beep, 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 beep. I turned around and there she was pushing on that button. So I gave her some peanuts. I thought that was her Helen Keller water under the water pump moment of inspiration and enlightenment. So step one, accomplished. But then I had to teach her that I wanted her to find my earrings. So I programmed one that said find. And every time I would see the squirrels out in the yard digging up the ones they'd already buried and pulling one out of the ground, I would push find. I don't know if that association was quite so strong, but I worked at it, and then I thought it was time to introduce the earring concept. And so I brought out the remaining earring from that pair, and I held it up, and I had the peanut, and I pushed the button with my elbow to say earring, and started doing find earring, find earring. I don't know. We did this for like a week and a half. No progress, really. And then she just stopped coming around. I didn't see her anywhere. I didn't see her for days. I mean, I knew she'd been getting a little fat. I thought maybe I'd created a monster, but then she just abandoned me. So, well, I have to admit, I went to worst case scenario. I thought maybe she'd gotten hit by a car or eaten by a coyote. Both of those things happen in our neighborhood. And I got pretty glum. I stopped putting the nuts out altogether, and I would just sit there on the bench. You know, I'd enjoy my flowers and stuff, but I was really feeling lonely for that squirrel. And after I would say it was about 10 days, here she came. She came from the neighbor's yard. I was so happy to see her. I hurried to get some nuts out before she got there, and I held one out for her, and then I realized she had two littler squirrels following her. And I thought that's why she was gone. She had babies, and she was keeping them in the nest until they were big enough to come out in the world. And then I saw that mafia boss squirrel following behind. I thought, ooh, maybe he's the daddy of this group. I don't know. But I held out the squirrel for her, the peanut for her, and she came over and she took it. And I realized those little ones They were kind of limping. I was worried they were hurt. But when they got close, they both stood up on their hind legs, and each one was holding an earring. One of them was mine. One of them, I don't know who it belonged to. But I was so grateful they put them there next to the buttons, and I gave them each some nuts, and I picked up that one that was mine, and it was clean and not tarnished at all. And I thought, oh, I'll take a little risk. I kind of wiped the hook off on my shirt, and then I tucked it into my ear and made eye contact with the mama squirrel. And as soon as I did, I could hear her talking, like in my head. And she was saying, human, peanut, babies, peanut, earring, peanut, babies. So every time she would come around, I would wear that earring and we would have these little conversations. I started adding buttons so that we could communicate better. And, well, I'm hoping someday we'll advance to some more enlightened, esoteric topics. But for now, we're mostly doing nouns. And that's okay. That's okay. But one thing I do know for sure, I have to go buy another bag of peanuts. Thank you.
Oh, Laura, those were great.
Thanks, Marty.
You reminded me of something that I forget what I was going to say, but we can unmute people so they can all cheer or whatever they want to do.
Oh, well done, Laura.
Thanks, Anne.
Those were great.
So, Marty, I guess you're going to have to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I can do that, sort of. Ooh, my lighting has changed with the, I don't know if that, yeah, that helped. The outdoor lighting is changing, of course. Hi, everybody. I forgot to mention donations. Please donate. It's, while we don't charge, we do pay tellers. We do have our own costs. So please pay and maybe come to the story swap. You don't have to tell, but we like getting feedback and having people to listen to our stories. So I am on the board of the Seattle Storytellers Guild. And I do live in Ellensburg, Washington, which is 2 hours from Seattle. So I don't get to the meetings. We have our meetings on Zoom, and we are going to have our membership meeting in June. Is that right, Barry? June 20?
Yeah, June 20th at
Yeah.
the Art Salon, downtown Seattle. I forgot to bring that up, but go ahead and tell them about that.
Everybody's invited to that, but it's in person only, kind of like the Dunn Garden thing. And Zoom has been a godsend for me because I tried to start storytelling here in Ellensburg and it didn't happen. There wasn't enough interest, and without Zoom, I wouldn't be doing a lot of this stuff. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody being here to listen to me tell a story. And before I start my story, I do have a little introduction, even though I was in a workshop recently where people were saying they don't like introductions to stories. But I'm going to do it anyway to give you some context into the way my silly brain works. I had finished my undergraduate degree in psychology, and I had a certificate for behavior management. But I couldn't find a job. Then I heard about the Washington State Fire Training Academy, and I thought that would be perfect. I'll just go train fires. That's another story, but the point is they don't train fires. Spoiler alert, they don't train fires. What they do is train people to fight fires, which is a very different sort of thing. So that's how my mind works. So here's the story. I had gone to graduate school and I finished my graduate degrees, and I was teaching and established in my job at a small college, small liberal arts college. And I really wanted to have a baby, but I didn't have anybody to have a baby with. I didn't have a boyfriend. I wasn't really dating anybody. There wasn't anybody that seemed father material. And I looked into adoption, but I don't know if you know this, adoption is really expensive, way more expensive than a cheap date and a one-night stand. And I looked into other options, but they're all very, very expensive. And I figured by the time I paid for that, I wouldn't have money left over for a kid. So I set all that aside until I was reading the paper one day and Target was having a baby sale. And I thought, oh, that's perfect, a baby sale. I'll go to the baby sale. And in my mind, there were these little bassinets lined up, not a whole bunch of them because most people want their babies, but a few bassinets here and there. And they were arranged by age, 0 to 3 months, 3 months to 6 months, different kinds of skin color. So you could try to find one to match you maybe a little bit. So I went to Target and I wandered up and down and back, around, in and out of all the aisles, and no babies. And I couldn't figure it out. It's a baby sale. Where are the babies? So I saw a woman who had a baby in her cart, and I went up to her and I was like, where did you get that? And she looked at me and kind of slowly backed away and went off. So I still kept wandering, and I found a clerk and I asked the clerk, where are the babies? What babies? You know, the babies. You've got a baby sale. Where are the babies? Lady, we don't sell babies. We sell stuff for babies. It's a stuff for babies sale. It's not a baby sale. So he kind of backed off, and I was discouraged and left the store, kind of embarrassed, just as the police were pulling up. And it occurred to me maybe the lady with the baby in her basket had called them, but I jumped in my car and drove away. And then Macy's was having a baby sale, so I went there, and it was the same sort of story, so I kind of gave up. Except I thought, you know, they're false advertising. They're saying they're selling babies, and they're not selling babies, and that just really ticks me off. So I went to a shyster lawyer, and we sued, and we won. And I got enough money to adopt a baby and feel comfortable with my salary to take care of it. And about a year and a half later, I had this beautiful baby girl. She had kind of blackish, a little bit of blackish curly hair, blue eyes, but of course babies always have blue eyes. 10 fingers, 10 toes. She was perfect. And it was supposed to be an open adoption, but honestly, all these years later, I haven't seen the mom at all. So she's my baby, but she was beautiful. And because I was teaching at a college, I had a lot of time off to bond with her, buying her mother's milk and all the right things. But as I had to go back to work, I realized I had to hire somebody to take care of her. I didn't want her in daycare, and the daycare, she would have been 5 years old before daycare had an opening anyway. So I went looking for someone, and I didn't know how to do it, but I remembered at the south end of town, there was an adult store. So I thought, I'll go to the adult store and see what they have. So Alex, I forgot to mention her name's Alex. Alex and I went to the adult store and we walked in. And I don't know if you've ever been to an adult store, but they don't have any adults except for the one creepy guy sitting behind the cash register. And they have all this equipment and stuff that I don't even know what it was about, like whips and chains and giant blow-up dolls and stuff like that. So this time I was the one who slowly backed out of the store. But I was still at a loss, and I talked to my friends, and they helped me figure out how to find someone to take care of little Alex. And I found this man named Max who had his own little boy, a little bit older than Alex, and his little boy's name was Alexander, so we decided we would call him Xander so we could keep the kids straight. And all Max wanted to do was be a house husband. He wanted to raise his son himself. The mom had disappeared soon after birth. He never heard from her. So he moved in. He had his room, Max had his, I had mine. Sorry, Xander had his, Max had his too. I had mine, Alex had hers. And he started taking care of the house. And let me tell you, it was like being a 1950s husband. I would come home from work, the house would be clean, the kids would be clean, there'd be dinner on the table. It was everything except the pipe and the martini handed to me at the door. It was fabulous. But I was kind of mad about the adult store thing and that was false advertising. So I went back to my shyster lawyer and we sued again and we won again. And with that money, I helped Max set up a daycare center at our house. So we bought all the equipment and the licenses and all that. And he just took care of our kids and his kids. And we actually got married and adopted each other's kids. And life was really good for a long time until I was driving in the mountains. I live in Washington State, and we've got mountains just like Boulder. Well, different from Boulder, but like Boulder. And it was snowing lightly. There was like just the littlest bit of snow on the road, and I'm in my all-wheel drive Subaru Outback, which is great in the snow, going about 20 miles an hour downhill, and I kept swerving, bouncing off the guardrails. One time I spun around, going 20 miles an hour in an all-wheel drive Subaru. I couldn't figure it out. I figured something had to be wrong with the car. The next day, I took it into my mechanic, and he looked at it, and he said, "You have all-wheel drive tires. All-weather tires, sorry, all-weather tires. All-weather tires are not all-weather tires. They are most weather tires, not all-weather tires." I'd been driving like that for years and didn't know traction tires were different from all-weather tires. This one got me really mad. First, I went out and bought traction tires, snow tires. Then I found a real lawyer, and we sued those tire companies for false advertising, and who knows how many other people have had that same misunderstanding. I couldn't possibly be the only one. So we sued big time and won huge. We got enough money to set aside for the kids' college education or whatever kind of education they wanted to do when they were that old, and to buy 300 acres of land that we put totally into conservancy and are in the process of restoring. All of that except 3 acres where we built another house. And we set up our old house into a school for K through 5. And of course, Max is in charge of that, and I'm still working. And the bottom line is a lot of people don't like me because of how I got my money. But I really think I've put it to good use between the daycare and the school and the 300 acres, well, 297 acres put into long-term conservancy. but I'm also bit by that lawsuit bug. So if y'all have any ideas, I'd love to hear them, because after all, it is the American way. Thank you. And now for something similar, or maybe completely different, I don't know. We have Walter Wilson. Where are you, Walter?
I'm
Come
here.
up, please. I need to change this. Walter is a third-generation Californian on both sides of his family, going back to the 1860s. He is retired and came to storytelling through Toastmasters and is a member of the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. His goal is to be a traditional storyteller working in the oral storytelling tradition, telling folk tales, fables, legends, and tall tales. In other words, stories passed down through generations, shaped by imagination, humor, and wonder. Tonight, he'll be telling a story called The Magician of Krakow. Take it away, Walter.
There once lived in Krakow a famous magician. He was known throughout Poland for his charms and enchantments. For all his knowledge, he was never satisfied. However much he learned, he wanted to know more. However powerful he became, it was not enough. He was determined to be the wisest, most powerful magician alive. He searched night after night, ancient books, manuscripts, scrolls. He chanted every enchantment he could find. He whispered every charm he knew. He realized that he did not have the power to achieve his greatest wish, to sit on the moon. There was one person he could ask. In order to do this, he would have to chant his most difficult, dangerous, and challenging enchantment. He went up to the cold, dark mountain. As he climbed the mountain, birds stopped singing. Animals scurried away. Eyes behind rocks, knotted and gnarled trees, looked at him. Why was the magician from Krakow here? What did he want? Who was he coming to see? Approaching midnight, he stood on the high peak on the mountain. The stars were lit by a full moon. The wind whispered. At midnight, he stepped out onto the ledge. The wind whisked by. He tucked on his coat. He would not waver. At midnight, with a calm, clear voice, he began his enchantment. The wind slowed. The stars dimmed. The all-seeing eyes behind their rocks and gnarled trees stepped back in fear. When he finished, all was quiet, silent. The stars were hidden in the darkness. All he saw was the light of the moon. When his enchantment, the words rolled off the edge of the cliff, down deep into the earth, as if they were sending a message. He turned, and standing in the shadows was a man in black. It was as if he had been standing there the whole time. You called? I am here. What is it that you want? It was the devil himself. Is it true that you can do whatever I ask? Is it true that you can grant me my greatest wish? Yes, But understand, when you have finished with your wish, your soul will belong to me. The magician nodded. This is what I wish. I wish to sit on the moon. When it comes time for you to take me, you may only take me when I am in Rome. The devil paused. He looked deep into his eyes, and he saw a fear that the magician would never achieve his greatest wish. The devil thought, once I grant him his wish, his soul will belong to me. From beneath his cloak, he pulled out a scroll. Sign. The magician signed. He folded it back into his cloak. The bargain was struck. The devil had a new convert. He would make use of his skills and his charms. All he had to do was wait. The devil felt gracious. Lucifer said, I will grant you what is your greatest desire. I will grant it to you before I give you your wish. I desire to travel the world. Bring me a great raven, that I may mount and travel throughout the world on his back. The devil summoned a great raven, bridled and saddled. The magician mounted the raven. To Krakow! Off the ledge they flew across the countryside, over the city of Krakow, the churches with their steeples, the narrow streets, the columns. They landed in the marketplace. Everyone came to see the great magician. From that time on, the magician traveled the world, seeing sights, enjoying his pleasures, his fantasies. The devil grew tired of his demands, his wishes. It was time to turn the tables. A terrible storm raged through the countryside, snow deep and heavy. The king's daughter, the royal princess, was gravely ill. The doctors, the witches, the sorcerers could not cure her. He sent a royal messenger to see the great magician. The royal messenger knocked on the door. The royal princess is dying. Everyone has given up. Only you can save her. The magician thought, if I can save her, I will be the smartest, the greatest magician alive. He gathered his potions, his charms. He went out and he got into the sled, pulled the blankets over him. The horses took off into the night, through the blizzard, through the cold. Hour after hour they went. Then in the distance, they saw a light of a tavern. The royal messenger said, why don't we stop in the tavern? Fill ourselves, warm ourselves. The magician said, let's do that. He was chilled to the bone. They walked into the tavern. A low fire crackled in the hearth. Shadows danced on the walls. Old men whispered at wooden tables. Smoke filled the air. The smell of damp wool, stale ale. The magician looked about and thought, this is not what I expected. This is not what I was looking for. He turned to the royal messenger. It was the devil himself, smiling. He turned and pointed his finger to a sign above the door. It read, Rome. The magician went into panic and fear. The devil grabbed him, dragged him across the floor, up into the hearth, through the cobwebs, the ashes, and the soot, into the sky, through the storm, into the darkness of night. There were no stars. There was only the light of a crescent moon. The magician panicked in fear. Then he realized something. Stop! Stop! The devil stopped in the darkness of night, holding on to him with all of his might. What is it that you want? You have not granted me my wish. Tell me what your wish is. Then you will be mine. I wish to sit on the moon. Lucifer, in rage, screamed and yelled at the magician. He threw him into the darkness of the night, and he disappeared. The devil can only visit earth and his home, not sacred places. The magician tumbled down, landed on the dirt, rolled over, and looked. He was sitting on the moon. His lifelong wish had been achieved. He looked at the earth and he was amazed. Unfortunately, he had no way home. He was there. My friends, next time you go out at night and you gaze at the moon, you just might see a man sitting on the moon.
All right, Walter, we can unmute and thank Walter real quick.
Well
That's a
done,
lovely
Walter.
Yay.
Mhm.
I always wondered how that man got up there.
Well done.
Okay, back to muting. Our next teller is going to be Ken Deluc. And Ken is a former naval officer and has retired from the fire service. Were you training fires, Ken? You have to unmute.
No,
There you go.
I put them out.
Anyway, he and his wife just celebrated their 35th anniversary. Congratulations. And he's busier now than before he retired. He putters around the house and yard in order to stay busy, keep off the streets, and out of jail. And maybe he'll tell us what he putters around the house with in his tale. But take it away, Ken.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone being here. Thank you very much. That was a great intro. It tells a little bit about me. Before I was in the fire service, I was actually in the healthcare profession. And healthcare profession is great. It feels so good to help people, to make them feel better. You know, to be in healthcare is just awesome. But the downside of the healthcare service is that even though there can be some tremendous highs, there can be some real lows as well, because not everyone gets better, unfortunately. And sometimes you'll have a patient, but you'll lose a patient, and it's just the reality of it. And as rewarding as the field can be, it really can be difficult when you lose a patient. And I remember one particular case. There was an older gentleman who was in the hospital, and he was really spry. He seemed to be doing really well. Great spirits, a lot of family support and stuff like that. And I was with him one day, and I lost him, and it was really hard. I took it really hard, and it was hard meeting with the family. Going to the family and telling them, your father, your grandfather, he's lost, and and I feel bad. It's terrible. It can be very, very difficult. That particular case, though, had kind of a happy ending because they found him. He was wandering around down in the basement So even though, I'd lost him, I didn't lose him for very long. But actually, that was the third patient that month that I had lost. So I got called into the administrator's office, and he said, Ken, you're a great orderly. We really like you. You have a great attitude and stuff like that, but you can't keep losing patients. It just doesn't look good for the hospital. It's not a good thing. So we're going to have to let you go. Well, that was disheartening because I wanted to be a doctor. And I figured if you can't be an orderly, you're very likely not going to be able to be a doctor. So I'm stuck now looking at, what am I going to do? What are my career choices here? I want to be a doctor mainly because I want to make a lot of money, obviously. So I need to find something that I can do that I can make a lot of money at. So I did a lot of soul searching, looked around, thought a lot, thought about what I could do. And I ended up picking something which, although was a lot more difficult than becoming a doctor, takes a lot longer than becoming a doctor, and is actually much harder than being a doctor. I figured I'm going to go for it anyway. And I decided to take the plunge, and I became a plumber. So I got an apprenticeship to become an apprentice plumber. I worked real hard. I learned everything. I learned all the ropes. I tried my hardest, got an apprenticeship, got a good job, learned more and more about being a plumber, and eventually became a journeyman plumber. And I got a great job at this big plumbing company actually in the Rockies, which is weird that you guys are all from Colorado because we did a lot of work in Colorado as well. And I worked for this big plumbing company, and I actually became their go-to plumber. I was the guy that they would go to when there was a really difficult job to be done. And I was kind of proud of that. I did a lot of work all throughout the Rockies, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, all those places like that. It was beautiful up there. You guys all know that. And I loved the job. I really loved it. And we once got this contract for this big park there. And this big park had lots of visitors used to come there all the time. It was a beautiful place. And this huge visitor center. And the visitor center had a cafeteria. And it had like a little movie theater where people, had a museum with the animals and a place where you could backpackers could come in and take showers and stuff like that. It was a really big, beautiful visitor center at this park. Problem was the park was so popular that the septic system for the visitor center was becoming overwhelmed. So they sent me over there to see what I could do. Now, if you've ever dealt with a septic system, you know that expanding a septic system is extremely expensive. Not an easy thing to do, takes a lot of time, disturbs the environment, not easy to do at all. So they sent me in there to see what I could do. So I went and I poked around, went down in the basement and looking at all the pipes and looking at how things are all arranged and everything like that. Now, I don't want to get too technical. Plumbing is very technical. I don't want to, fog you guys with all my technical expertise. So I'll break this down real easy. Plumbing is fresh water going in and dirty water coming out. But the dirty water, there's two different types of dirty water. There's gray water, which is the water that comes out of the sinks in the kitchen and the showers and places like that. And there's black water, which is sewage, which is what comes out of the bathrooms, the toilets. Now, septic systems are designed to treat sewage. But if you overload them with all the gray water as well, then they don't work as well. So I figured what I could do, instead of them expanding their septic system, I'll just separate the gray water from the sewage water. And we'll put all of the gray water into a big tank and send the sewage out into the septic system and therefore expand the life of this septic system by 20, 30, 50 years. Smart guy. So I went down in the basement and I replumbed everything. I moved all the pipes around. I put this pipe there and that pipe there. And ran all the gray water into a big tank in the basement, and all the sewage went right out into the septic system. Perfect solution. Perfect solution until I realized that once that tank was filled, that water had to go somewhere. So I figured, well, okay, I'll just pump it outside, and it doesn't need to go in a septic system, just go somewhere else. So I went outside the visitor center and poked around on the grounds out there. And about a couple hundred yards away from the visitor center, I found this hole in the ground. And it was a big hole, maybe 12, 14 inches around. It was really deep. I dropped a rock down there. I never even heard the rock at the bottom. And it's kind of warm air was coming out of it, which wasn't surprising. There's a lot of geothermal activity and stuff around in that area. So I figured what I can do is I'll run a pipe from that tank and down into this hole. And then I'll put a timer on the tank so it'll only send water in after the tank gets full. So maybe every 2, 3, 4 hours or so, pump will kick in, the water will go through the pipe and down into the hole. So I ran a pipe, put the pipe down in the hole, and then I waited and I set the timer on the tank, and I set up a lawn chair next to the hole. And I waited and waited and waited. And eventually the tank filled, the timer went off, and the water pumped down into the hole. And I could see the water going down in the hole and everything like that. It all went down, and then the water stopped because the timer went off and the pump was done. The tank was empty. So I figured, hey, this is great. Life is good. I got rid of the gray water. Sewage is going where it's supposed to be. I folded up my lawn chair, and I headed back into the visitor center. As I was walking back, all of a sudden I heard this rumbling sound. And the ground was kind of vibrating a little bit, which I thought was kind of odd. And the rumbling got louder and the vibration got longer and stronger. And I looked back at the hole, and all of a sudden, all of this water, just steam and water, came shooting up out of the hole. I mean, it shot up like 50, 100 feet, all this water. So all I could figure was that the water from this tank had gone down, hit some really hot rocks, turned into steam, and blew back out again. Well, that lasted maybe 30, 60 seconds or so, and then it stopped. I go, wow, that's kind of weird, but perfect. The water's gone. I have solved this problem. Well, what I didn't know that some people had come out of the visitor center and they saw this happen and they thought it was kind of cool. And I said, hey, you know what? You wait 2, maybe 3 more hours. It's going to happen again. They're going, oh, are you kidding? I said, yeah, I have a sense for this kind of thing. He said, oh, wow, we're going to go tell our friends. So I went back, had some lunch, came back out, brought my lawn chair. A couple hours later, by this time, there were like 30, 40 people sitting around this hole. And I'm going, okay, people were obviously bored. But all of a sudden, I hear the pump kick in. The water goes down the hole. The ground starts to rumble a little bit. And then this water just shoots out of the hole. 50, 100 feet up in the air, steam and water. And all these people are taking pictures and they're taking movies and they're just loving this thing that's happening. And it's gone. It goes for about 60, 90 seconds or so, and it stops. And these people are clapping and they're happy. This is like the greatest thing they've ever seen. And I'm thinking, well, okay, well, whatever. It's okay with me. I've done my job. And so then I waited one more time just to make sure it happened. By this time, the crowd was like 300, 400 people were waiting for this thing to go off. And sure enough, the water went down, the ground leveled, the water comes streaming out. So that's been a long time. And my understanding is that that attraction has become so popular at the park, they even named it. I don't remember what the name is now. It's been about 30 years since I've been back to Yellowstone. But as far as I know, that system is still pumping and geysering out faithfully. So if you're ever over in that area, you might want to stop by and check it out. That's it. Sorry.
I was so afraid when you started that this was going to be a really sad story, and it wasn't.
You don't ever want to lose a patient. It's not good for your career.
If people want to unmute and...
I love that, especially when you said at the end that it's coming up faithfully, or yeah, as if we didn't get it, but yeah.
I always wondered where it came from.
Now you know, Marty.
Now I know. It reminded me of this postcard I had of a picture from 1930 something of building the irons. It's like, all the scaffolding and stuff while they're building the flat irons. So it's just same sort of thing. Anyway, we have one more story tonight. Anne Brendler. Where's Anne? There she is. And this is Anne Brendler, aka Sue Superperson. And as of May 2026, our illustrious Seattle Storytellers Guild president, Anne, has morphed into Sue Superperson, none other than a superhero who can rival Captain America. Just when the world needed another superhero, Anne has stepped into the breach yet again to save humanity. With her Prada-designed spandex uniform of deep purple, complete with hood and sparkling cape, and with her borrowed thrill-seeker climbing boots from REI, she has appreciated every opportunity to save lives while only modestly claiming fame. Settle back and listen now to another exciting episode. Sue Superperson and the Great Wheel of Seattle. Take it away, Anne.
Thank you, Marty. My name is Sue Superson, and I do come from Seattle. At least that's my nickname, my moniker. I need to inform those of you who may not be from Seattle or who have never been to London or any of the other big cities in the world that the Great Wheel of Seattle is a gigantic Ferris wheel. And the compartments that you ride in, that you actually pay money to ride in, are enclosed. You have all this clear plexiglass around you, and you can see out all over Puget Sound and all over the city of Seattle, and it's a beautiful view from up top. But when you are up top, you are 175 feet up off the ground. So it is not for the faint of heart. I used to be one of those faint of heart people, but I want you to know that I have challenged myself to ride the Great Wheel, and not only that, I have a story to tell about it. The Great Wheel and I have had quite an adventure together. It all started just a few weeks ago. You see, I turned 80, and I am 5'4", well, sometimes 5'4.5" if I stand on tiptoe. I weigh 135 pounds, but I am mighty strong. I can lift a can of soup in each hand, up and down without breaking a sweat. I can leap over small building blocks in a single bound. I can climb trees. I can climb mountains. Well, I've only climbed one mountain, actually. And, but I don't use carabiners, and I don't use a climbing helmet because it just itches terribly. And, I'm really, really great at figuring out how to tie knots. I'm really good at knots, and just give me any rope and I can tie a square knot, I can tie a bowline, I can do a full hitch, a half hitch, quarter hitch, a hitch in my get along. I can tie the frayed knot, but my favorite is the Oh Shirley knot. I can tell somebody's temperature by solar angle calculations, and I can even deduce their blood pressure by frontotemporal lobe palpations. I have many, many hidden talents. And so I need to tell you that I became, shortly after my 80th birthday, I became a rescue squad member at the Great Wheel of Seattle. Now, there aren't many rescues that are needed there. I mean, it's a beautifully run machine, but I have put another notch in my belt, shall we say, another star on my badge that I have done a rescue at the Great Wheel. And I'll tell you what happened. Well, you see, in my bag of tricks, I have all kinds of items. I have pliers. I have my
a Swiss Army knife. I have a surgical mask. I have a telescope. I have a pair of tweezers. I have a matchbox. I have tissues. I have I have chocolate fudge, because that's really good if you come across somebody who has a twisted ankle. And mosquito bites can be cured with a jar of soap bubbles. So I carry the fudge and the soap bubbles also. I carry ice cubes. I just come equipped for everything. And the first day of my duty at the Great Wheel, I went on down there to the waterfront, and I walked up to the ticket booth and I said, I'm here. This is my first day, and I'm on the rescue squad. And she said, she's very, very nice. We're so glad you're here. Here's your badge. And what you want to do is go over to that door over there. Here's the code. She showed me the code on a piece of paper. And you go down, you open the door, you go down the stairs, and the folks down there will tell you what to do. That's where Rescue Squad headquarters is. And so I took the number, and I had, my backpack on, and I decided not to wear my sparkly purple suit, and I just thought that would be overkill. So I just wore my regular clothes and had my backpack loaded with all my goods. And I went over and I opened the door and I went on down this long flight of stairs, and I got to an enormous room. Oh my gosh, it looked like mission control. And there were these banks of computer screens up at the front of the room, and lots of computers around on different tables and such, but nobody was at the computers. They were all over at one side of the room staring at one person's computer monitor. I wondered what was going on. Well, I said, trying not to bother everybody, is this the Great Wheel Rescue Squad headquarters? Nobody even turned around. Nobody seemed aware that I was there. The room just buzzed with this kind of electronic hum. So I cleared my throat. I tried again. Is this the Great Wheel Rescue Squad headquarters? Again, nothing. Everyone was intent on that computer monitor across the way. So this time, third time's the charm, I yelled. I said, is this the Great Wheel Rescue Squad head? And sure enough, this one guy turns around and he comes running over and he says, oh my gosh, thank goodness you're here. We really, really need you. I said, what exactly is going on? Well, he says, there's we're communicating with this woman up in gondola 47, and he gestures high up in the air of this cavernous room. I said, what's gondola 47? Oh, he says, that's the luxury box, and she's up there, and she's got some sort of claustrophobia, but the worst part of it is that she is in the midst of a nosebleed, and that luxury box we can hardly imagine sending anybody up there. And I said, well, I'm here, I can do this. And oh, thank goodness you're here. And I began to calm down a little bit, because when I had first seen all those computers, I began to fear that I was going to have to use a computer, and computers and I just simply don't get along. But if I could go up 175 feet in the air, that was much better for me than using a computer. So I said, all righty, I'm your gal, and I will manage this rescue. And I said, but first, have you tried calling her on the gondola phone? Oh, yes, we have tried calling her on the gondola phone, but she's too busy trying to stop her nosebleed. I said, okay. What else can we do? Is there any way, I said, that you could like open the door of gondola 47 so she could get a little closer to the entryway, and then we could get someone there and get her and bring her on down? Oh no, we can't open the gondola door when it's way up there off the ground. That's against federal, state, county, and city regulations. You cannot do that. You cannot open up a gondola when it's way, way up there. I said, all right. So I think we're going to have to do this the hard way, I said. I think this is a critical situation, and it calls for you, I said, pointing to this young man. I said, you need to give me your REI climbing boots. I had my crummy ones on. He said, my climbing boots? My climbing boots? I said, yeah, your climbing boots, because mine are the crummy. I didn't bring really good climbing boots, and yours are really nice. And I snatched them off his feet. Yes, I did. And I put them on. Oh, they were a little big, a little clunky, but they were REI. And I dumped out my backpack and I repacked it with just the things I would need. I would need the rope. I would need the tissues. I would need, of course, my Swiss Army knife. I would need the telescope and the tweezers and the matchbox and the flashlight and my cell phone, and I probably put a few other things in there, but I don't really remember. But I do remember I got the critical things, and I loaded on my backpack, and he was not pleased I was taking his boots. He said, I want those boots back. I said, you'll get them. You'll get them. Do not fear. And I went running up the stairs and out into the concrete plaza where the Great Wheel is located. And I waved to my friend at the ticket booth. But I did notice that in the time that I had been underground, a fire truck had pulled up, a great big one with a great big long ladder. Now, who called the fire truck? This was going to be my rescue. This was not supposed to be a firefighter rescue. I was on the Great Wheel Rescue Squad. It was my turn to, I wanted the glory. So I noticed nobody had gone up the ladder yet, even though it had been deployed. So I snuck around the back of the fire engine and I climbed. I had my super grippies on. Those are these gloves. You can get them at any climbing store. They're especially any climbing store in your neighborhood. You just put on these super grippies. Oh, they're great. And I went climbing up my super grippies and my REI climbing boots, and up 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 I went. Oh my gosh, there she was in gondola 47. Yes, indeed, the luxury gondola. Boy, she must have paid a lot for that. And she was probably pretty ticked that she got this darn nosebleed. Anyway, there she was, and the blood was coming out of her nose. And so I opened the door to the gondola and I said, look, take these. And I gave her a whole wad of tissues. Her face like that. And then I said, now, I brought something really special. See, I brought my crystal pendulum. See this? Now, what you're going to need to do, you just calm down. You just lean your head back with all the tissues up to your face and just watch my crystal pendulum as I swing it gently back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Well, she had lost so much blood that she was just exhausted. And she leaned her head back. She had the tissues up and she's watching the crystal pendulum back and forth. And pretty soon she fell asleep. Oh, that was perfect. Because then I got out my tweezers and my telescope and my little matchbox, and I looked at her through the wrong end of the telescope, and I picked her up with the tweezers and put her ever so gently, tissues and all. She was just a little tiny thing because I looked at her with the wrong end of the scope, and I popped her right into the matchbox, and then ever so gently I closed the matchbox with her in it, and I carefully put it down in my backpack. Put the backpack, oh, I was sure to take that crystal, let me tell you. And I put my backpack back on, had the telescope, had everything I came with. I went climbing on back down that ladder, and climbing up the ladder, here came a firefighter. I said, "Excuse me, but the Great Wheel Rescue Squad is on the way down. Get out of the way." And he did. I couldn't believe it. He moved to one side, and I went all the way back down to the ground. And by that time, there was lots of media and TV cameras and such. And I felt so proud of myself. And I reached into my backpack and got out the little matchbox and opened it up. And then I got my telescope again, and I looked at the little teeny tiny lady in the matchbox through the right end of the telescope, and poof, she came right back up to normal size. She was still asleep. She came right back up to full size, and then I stood next to her, very reassuringly, putting my arm around her shoulder. And I said, with my fingers, and she woke up, and the rescue was complete. Her nosebleed had stopped, and everybody was cheering. I don't think the firefighters were too pleased that they'd been called out on an errand that they couldn't solve, but I was so happy I had saved her. And that is my first experience in the Great Wheel Rescue Squad. And so if you come to Seattle to take a ride, just know that if you get stuck at the top because there's some sort of computer problem running the Great Wheel, I'll be there to rescue you. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That is so good, Anne. What to say is, if you want to put something in the chat, please do it after rather than during stories.
That's enough on that. We want to thank you all for being here this evening and sharing these stories. I will mention that there is a Liars Club that Anne and Norm have.
Not
August 1st.
Not this Anne.
Not this Anne. It's Anne Rutherford and Norm Brecky, who used to hang around up here, but now they hang around down there in California. I don't know why. But anyway, they're having a Liars Club that runs from noon, I think, to 6 o'clock. And they've got several groups of tellers telling stories. If you want to find any information about that, you go to ann/norm.com, and it's on Zoom. It's something to consider if you're really into lies and you haven't been wore out by our LiarsFest, and then the Liars Contest at Space Needle, or you've gone up to Port Angeles, where Ken is, for the Liars contest they have up there, the Story People of Clallam County. But to tell you the truth, I don't care. All these Liars' tales are great. Thank you all for coming tonight, for sharing the stories.
Wait a minute,
everybody.
And even though you live in Colorado, you're welcome to join us anytime.
Thanks so much. That was a great night.
On the On the fourth Monday of each month, except not this month because it's Memorial Day weekend, I host a Liars Club where we can practice our lies. If anybody's interested, just get in touch with Seattle Storytellers and they'll give you the information rather than putting it in the chat. But anyway, that's fourth Monday.
Yeah, SeattleStorytellers.org.
Yep.
Please donate if you can. And
And don't forget the workshop
And
tomorrow
thank
morning.
you.
Laura will be there. I'll be there. I hope some of you will be there as well.
I'll be there.
Be there.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Laura.
Thank you.
Good night.